When it comes to societal collapse on a global scale, bugging out of the danger zones represented by cities and other urban areas will definitely be the right move to make. All right, but that only applies if you're truly ready to bug out for real. And I don't mean heading out into the woods to camp or moving back into your mom's basement. I mean a real end of civilization, I'm never going back home kind of bug out. Now, to do that right and to survive societal collapse, you need a comprehensive operations plan, and a damn good one. That's what we're going to talk about today, my friends. Welcome to the wasteland. Hey everyone, this is Chris, and you're watching Wasteland by Wednesday. Now, on today's menu, we have the ever-popular topic of bugging out. All right, now, if you've watched my other videos, you've probably got a bag put together, you got a vehicle all kitted out, and you've chosen a good bug out location to go to when the shit hits the fan. So, now you're asking, what's next? Well, let's talk about it. Where will you be going first? What route will you take? What will you do when you get there? And definitely, what will you do if something goes wrong along the way? This is where the most important element of a bug out comes into play, and that is the plan. Without it, you're dead in the water or on the pavement. So you can have all the best gear, lots of real-world training and experience, and even some kind of post-apocalyptic vehicle rig that would make Mad Max take a respectful step back, okay? But none of that's going to help you much if you don't have a well-thought-out plan. As you watch this, I want you to keep in mind that a bug-out plan is, of necessity, a constantly evolving thing, okay? Your early days getting started prepping, you might not have much experience, or maybe you're out of shape, or simply don't have much in the way of resources yet, whatever. And that's fine. We all start from the bottom and work upwards. But with the potential to have a bug out happen at any given time, it's important to have some sort of operational plan in place as soon as possible. Don't get discouraged by not having everything you think you need yet, and certainly don't get bogged down looking for perfection. Even a partial plan is better than no plan at all, so don't wait, start planning now. Besides, planning for a bug out is such a massive project that it's going to take quite a bit of time, especially if you're just getting started. As you grow and become more capable as a prepper and better equipped to handle collapse, you'll add to and adjust to your plan as you go. A real collapse prep bug out plan is a constantly growing and evolving thing, and you grow and evolve along with it. There are a ton of myths and misconceptions out there when it comes to the idea of bugging out. And while dispelling those isn't the purpose of this video, I am going to dump one for you right away, and I'm sure it's going to be unpopular. Bugging in is a trap. There, I said it. Despite what you hear from so many of the traditional preppers across YouTube and beyond, bugging out is absolutely not a last resort type of thing. It's actually the very first thing you should do if it even seems like the shit's about to hit the fan. Okay, why is that? Well, I'm not going to go down the whole list here. I've already made the what to expect video for what societal collapse will actually look like, and I'll link that here. But the short answer is that, look, we're talking about collapse prepping here, okay? Urban areas and even close proximity rural ones, those will be absolute death traps once the boom comes down. You'll have plenty of early warning days beforehand, but you don't want to waste them exploring bug-in options and banking on the hopes that everything's going to blow over. If you go too early, well, no loss there. However, if you wait until it's too late...
That's just fucking great, man! Now what the fuck are we supposed to do?
No, one of the most fundamental rules for collapse prepping is to bug out and to do it early and fast, okay? And go far. You're always going to do it with a predefined plan taking you to a fortified and prepared location that you've already set up. Like the bags and vehicles, the idea of a location is discussed in another one of my bug out videos. Today, we're just going to be discussing your operations plan. Your operations plan or op plan is the glue that holds your entire bug out operation together, okay? Having your bag and kit squared away is one thing, and setting up where to go and a vehicle to get you there is another. But those are only 3 of the 4 critical elements of a bug out operation. The last crucial element is the plan that ties everything together into a workable operation. It doesn't matter how good everything else is, without a properly tried and tested plan regarding how you will make all the other elements work together, your bug out will quickly turn into a clusterfuck. A complete bug-out operations plan will have at least 5 main parts to consider, okay? There can be others and of course subparts to each of these, but the basic structure is as follows. Defining the objective of the plan, detailing where the operations will take place, assessing all threat vectors and dangers, equipment and asset organization, and finally the actual route planning itself. And look, all this sounds like a lot, but it doesn't have to be crazy complex, especially not at first, okay? The basic idea is that once you can see that collapse is imminent, you have to take action to protect yourself and your family from whatever threats are coming your way. That means you need to be aware of the threats and have a plan to get out of harm's way, PDQ, all right, as fast as possible. The first step is to define your objective goal fully. It isn't just as simple as saying that your plan is to reach your bug out location. Ideally, with the end goal being a safe arrival, you will have a tiered system of objectives for each stage or phase of that larger operational goal. For example, you'll need to have contingency plans for meeting up with others if you're not together when collapse gets underway. And you need to have different options for different circumstances, all right? That means that your initial objective may be something like a preset rally point or the location of a prepositioned survival cache. Maybe just clearing the city limits is the first part. Either way, defining your objective means listing in order everything that you need to do to complete the mission, no matter what contingencies pop up. Now, once you have your mission objectives set down, the next stage of planning is to define the limits of your area of operations, or AO. Now, if you've watched this channel before, you have heard me harp on about the AO plenty, and that's because it's a critical thing to be very familiar with the environment that you'll be operating in. Your AO is the geographical area where your operations will be taking place. Now, when it comes to collapse prepping, I have two different categories of AO. There's mission AO and then there's territorial AO. A mission AO is an area closely defined by specific operational parameters, meaning the area where the mission actions will actually happen. A territorial AO, on the other hand, is much larger, representing the entirety of the land surrounding your bug out location and stretching out as far as you can reasonably expect to manage post-collapse. There can be many different mission areas within your overall area of operations, and each one will be specific to that mission's individual objectives. Now, today we are primarily talking about the mission AO, and that is the area and path where your actual bug out will take place. Now, there is one part of area planning that I want to mention specifically, and that is being able to determine modes of transport based off of the terrain and distance that you'll be covering. 100 miles is 100 miles, but there's a big difference in those miles if it's moving along open desert trails or if it's along a heavy forested riverbank or something. You also want to make sure that you're actually going to have the necessary modes of transport that you're planning for, okay? Don't plan for a Jeep until you actually have one. In short, make sure that you know your area well enough to figure out how you'll be moving around it effectively. Some bug outs will be exclusively vehicle-based and others may have foot travel as the primary mode. It's all dependent upon the area of operations and your specific plan. The third step in the planning process is threat assessment. All right, this is the part of the operational planning and research where you identify risks and threat vectors that may or will exist within your AO. You have to work out exactly how serious each one is and what you can do to reduce or eliminate those threats. Threat categories are usually thought of in three terms or events. There's the main event, and then there's ancillary events that happens as a result of the main event, and then there's transitory events that are things that can take place along the way. Our first category is regarding the direct cause of the collapse that you're retreating from. This is the main event that brings about your need to bug out of the area. You must go over the factors for where you're located and have available options for various types of SHTF scenarios. Invasion by a hostile military power is one. The pending kickoff of a nuclear exchange is another. And even things like regional or nationwide grid down events and certainly newly emerging deadly pandemics. All right, all of those are possible SHTF scenarios that you have to have a plan for. Whatever is possible for your region, those are the things that you must evaluate and plan for when doing your threat assessment. In addition to the main event, as it were, you need to also assess the threats that could come from other vectors based on that main event. These can be termed as ancillary events, and they are usually unique to your specific local neighborhood. Does your area have a strong criminal element or a large gang population? If so, you need to plan for extra criminal threats that could pop up quicker than in other areas. Are you close to something like a chemical plant or a petroleum refinery? If so, you got to do some research into what damage or destruction of that facility could do to your surrounding area. Any and all threat vectors nearby need to be considered and steps taken to counter them. So, we have the main event and ancillary events covered, and after that, there are what we can refer to as transitory events. These are potential threats that can exist along the way to your bug out location. These can either be static threat possibilities, such as private compounds or military bases that are along the way, or they can be dynamic threats, such as wildfires in an area that's prone to such things, or even dust storms like I have out here in the desert regions. Now, static threats are usually planned for using avoidance tactics when planning your route and also while on the move. Knowing where these threats are located is part of your AO planning. You also have to have backup plans in place should one of these static threats become an active problem as the bug out takes place. What do you do if the local army base decides to close and monitor the roads? You got to have a plan for that. Dynamic threats require contingency plans as well because depending on the SHTF main event, there could be many other things happening at once. Wildfires along the way are a great example. You need to have plans in place to deal with them should they occur. Knowing the potential dangers that are prone to happen in the area of your bug out is a key part of threat assessment. The idea is that no matter what happens, there's a plan for that and you have it. Okay, after threat assessment, our next step is organization and equipment planning. Okay, you have to come up with loadouts or individual gear plans for each member of your team as well as for the vehicles that'll be used. This is where those bug out bags and vehicles from my previous videos come into play. Those are subjects, like I said, covered in the other videos I have posted in this bug out playlist series, but I'll touch on a few things when it comes to planning around them. With vehicles, make sure that you're well aware of your vehicle's capabilities when you're planning. You should know from previous experience and practice runs just how much fuel you need to get where you're going, what sort of mileage you get off-road versus on-road, and what kind of terrain you can actually cross effectively. Think about things such as visibility issues and camouflage. It's all well and good to have an orange Jeep during peacetime, but after you bug out, you better make sure you have that you've planned for how to make your vehicle a little less visible. A few cans of spray paint might be in order. When it comes to gear, you have to tailor your kit to the plan and to your environment and climate. Bugging out into the desert requires a different approach to things like clothing and water than does bugging out into the mountains or along a river. Wherever you are and where you are going, there will be many specific things to consider when planning how to outfit and supply your team. Make sure you spend the time it takes to fully evaluate what you're going to need. Another part of this step is making a sub-plan for comms or communication. Comms will be critical, especially if you're trying to manage a group that is spread out across the city or whatnot, or if your bug out run comes late and parts of the telecommunication grid are already down or unreliable. Comms will be a video all its own in the future for sure, but in short, making sure that all team members are trained up and equipped with the right commo gear, aware of the comm plan, and familiar with any necessary code jargon, that'll be paramount. As a side note, integrating things like message drop locations is a part of this planning, as well as having prearranged signs that can be displayed in specific places to alert team members to various situations. For example, having a red handkerchief tied to your vehicle antenna could mean that you have had exposure to a plague carrier, or that you have wounded with you, or maybe that you simply have extra people that you picked up along the way. Another thing you can do is have places where marks can be left with chalk secured on location, such as a signpost or a wall in an alley. Little messages to let others passing through know that you've made it this far and then continued on. Whatever it is, having these plans set up and memorized beforehand is critical. Finally, we get to the last part and probably the most time-consuming part of your bug-out plan, and that is route preparation. All right. Ideally, you should have 3 main routes planned for the bug-out: a primary, secondary, and tertiary route. And there can be many ancillary sub-routes, shortcuts, or alternate paths planned within each as needed. you need to know what to do if your primary route becomes compromised, either due to collapse events or hostile actions of opposing forces. What do you do then? You can't afford to waste time or be indecisive in the middle of your bug out. You need to have alternate routes planned already from every stage of your journey. That way, no matter what happens or where, you have a contingency in place to make up for it. Part of planning all these routes will be giving them designations to make effective communication easier between team members. Each main route gets a name, and each subpart can get a designation as well to quickly let everyone on your team know your location without broadcasting that info to opposing forces. Being able to give your position as one click to the north out of Bravo 7 sounds much better than saying, I'm up the street a ways on Town Center Drive just past the Shell gas station. Okay, you want to be able to be clear, but you want to reserve that clarity for your own team, not for those who may be listening in. This part is kind of a crossover with your communications planning. Another key part to route preparation is to not limit yourself to the conventional methods of transiting an area. Roads are great, but in the course of a disaster or societal collapse, they're going to become clogged or blocked PDQ. You don't want to be stuck trying to rely on roads and highways for your evacuation. In addition, roads are natural funnels that could be used by potential opposing forces or other hostile elements to detect and/or interdict traffic. You want to have options for avoiding that. Pay attention to all the unconventional ways of getting through and across your city or town. Things like those miles-long walking and biking paths that cut through the city in between neighborhoods and stuff. These things can be everywhere, and they cover a lot of ground without many people to create traffic. Also, make sure to map out and inspect aqueducts and flood channels and washes that run through your city. Knowing where they are and where they lead to could be key for using them as alternate routes. Railroad tracks are another great example of unconventional routes, and they usually have service roads running alongside. Such tracks are always good for making quick work of cutting through the city to get out. There's also all kinds of special hiking trails and even dirt or gravel forestry roads that can lead outwards from the city. All of these things and more are parts of what I mean when I say the unconventional means of getting out of the city. In a crisis, most people will turn to the roads believing there to be no other option, but proper planning will mean that you'll have other options while they do not. And at its core, that's what prepping really is, giving yourself more and better options than what everyone else has. Now, the reason why route preparation ends up being such a huge part of the planning process is because choosing your routes is just the beginning. Okay, once you have these preliminary routes in mind, the next stage is to go out and actually recon them fully. Okay, by that I mean you physically and visually inspect the routes while making an actual transit. Okay, just like you were bugging out and going to your bug out location. You want to drive the same roads, walk the same paths that you plan to use during your bug out. And when doing so, you want to drive your intended bug out vehicle and hump your actual bug out bag. This is something you should do more than once and in different conditions, such as day and night transit and other runs to account for seasonal differences. Taking the exact same routes in winter as opposed to summer is usually a starkly different experience, and you need to account for those variables in the planning phase, not on mission day one. The primary goal here is to become very familiar with your routes, the terrain, and the climate factors. You also want to be able to identify various obstacles, choke points, or ambush positions that may require additional contingency planning. You can also locate and record the positions of various resources along your route, such as water and shelter, and maybe even identify more potential risks or dangers. During this process is when you will set up all of your checkpoints and rally points along the way, and possibly even distribute supply caches. At the end of all this, what you want to have is personal experience with your bug out routes so that you don't have to stop and think about it when the shit hits the fan. Okay, you'll already know where you're going, you won't have to waste time with maps, and it won't matter if your GPS gets fried by an EMP, because you've already been there and done that many times already. You know where you're going, you just got to get there. So these 5 parts form the general framework for a good operational bug out plan. Yours will no doubt include many other variables as you tailor it for your specific circumstances and conditions. There will be lots of smaller sub-plans to your overall plan, and many of these can also function as standalone plans for other situations. For example, having an urban evacuation plan for getting out of the city as quickly and cleanly as possible can certainly be of use without the situation calling for a full bug out. You may simply need to get out ahead of a wildfire or an approaching hurricane. Such an evac plan can work both for the bug out and for other situations. Much of your communications plan will also have cross functionality between other plans and operations. Basically, planning a complete bug out operation from start to finish and going through all the potential issues that can crop up can be a very defining exercise for your overall preparedness. You'll learn a lot of useful information about your area and your physical capabilities as well as those of your vehicles. You'll get the chance to make supplementary plans that will give you a head start planning other aspects of your preps, and you'll get to do a good amount of in the field training, practicing with your gear, and exercising your skills. A lot of pre planning information is gathered up during this process as well. One big issue with prepping in general is making sure that you're aware of your own capabilities and limitations when it comes to both skills and fitness. Okay, it's all well and good to make plans to cover 20 miles a day on foot, but when the time comes, if it turns out that you're not capable of such a strenuous task, or if the terrain was tougher to transit than expected, well, it can turn your entire plan into a non starter. Going out and actually running your plan fully in the field means you'll know more about what you can and can't do than ever before. And that'll help you when planning every other aspect of emergency preparedness. All right, my friends, if you like this content and want to see more of it, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. Any questions, go ahead and feel free to drop a comment. I try to respond to all of them as time allows. Till next time, stay safe, stay ready. It's a wasteland out there.